Marvis Minis. This is Sudhir's favorite baby, new baby in the block. If you listen to Sudhir, there's only two problems. Life should be simple, right? Either Wi-Fi can't connect. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that problem this morning. Or Wi-Fi sucks, right? And as long as we have users on the network, we have plenty of data to understand their pre-connection and post-connection problems. But what happens when we don't have users on the network? That is where Marvis Minis comes into play. Marvis Minis is the first synthetic user on the market right now that allows us to ensure that all critical network services and critical business applications are actually up and running before the business opens in the morning. So this is what we announced last year at MFD. This year, what we're announcing is Marvis Minis client to cloud application visibility. This is where Marvis Minis now has complete visibility from the client application to the application in the public and private cloud. So we have synthetic users now going from everywhere on every MIS device and in the internet pops across the internet. This will allow us now to get to the root cause of a client, the application problem, and isolate it down to the router or the service provider in between those two aspects. And what you're going to see coming up here in Sudhir's demo is that Marvis Minis SLE. That is going to be the industry's first way of actually taking data and getting to the root cause of that client cloud user experience. Sudhir, time for razzle dazzle.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for hosting us. We are excited to be here. If you haven't seen the press, we actually do our big press announcements. Like Sujay said, on Mobility Field Day, there's actually a press release that went out today around this Marvis client to cloud story. We're very, very excited because, as we look at this thing, Marvis Minis has become sort of the new source of truth in networking. What does that mean? What that means is, Marvis Minis doesn't take a weekend off. They don't have a bank holiday if they're in Europe. It doesn't actually work on a laptop with CPU pegged or is in a bad Wi-Fi area. Marvis Minis has become deterministic. So with that determinism, what we've been able to do is actually at an entire organization level, I want to say, hey, I want to understand how network services are doing at the full organization, right? Because very deterministic data is feeding into this to say, okay, which sites are having DHCP issues, which locations are having DHCP DNS radius issues, being able to understand at a global level for an organization. Then we say, okay, this is great, but what about, applications? Now, for the first time, this is the Marvis Minis application service level. What this is doing is at an end-to-end level, being able to say which sites are having failures, and for an individual site, where is an application degrading? So think about, a million minis around the world feeding into my application experience. And basically, for us, most of the other systems in the world in the industry, focus on observability. For us, it is all about actionable insight. We want to bring you to an actionable data point to say, hey, for this user, for on this application at this particular site, it is either the wireless, the WAN, the LAN, it may be somewhere deep into the internet circuits, maybe it is closer into the public-private clouds, So now with Minis deployed globally, right, we've taken an architectural approach to this. Historically, every other vendor wants you to deploy overlay sensors, agents on laptops, Raspberry Pis, costs a lot of money. Built into the subscription of current Marvis subscription for our global customers, Marvis Minis client to cloud means that architecturally, no sensors, no agents, no Raspberry Pis, no deploying on your, an agent on your router. Minis is running across the global internet, across all the POPs. And so what does that mean? What that means is now there are minis running in CDN POPs around the world. And so we are establishing this last mile baseline for every one of our customers. And so now that we know this, 1 million minis around the world are contributing to the answer on if one individual application is slowed down at one site, at several sites, multiple applications at a site, multiple applications across the entire organization. We're able to actually pinpoint to be able to get to, is it an application issue? Is it a point in the circuit? Where in the circuit, is the application degraded? This entire picture we've now appended to Marvis Minis last year. What we launched was on the LAN wireless side with an agent sitting on the SD-WAN circuit as well, right? So this is, yeah, Peter, good.
You've talked about across multiple sites within an organization, but are you doing anything across organizations? That there's a cloud-based application that's gone down at the cloud level that's used by multiple organizations. Are you looking at that?
Yeah, so actually, the reason we keep saying 1 million minis around the world is with the millions of Juniper APs deployed out there, all contributing to the health of a WAN circuit, right? And so if everything's pointing towards, hey, my SAP application or my Salesforce application is degraded, yeah, that's a global thing that we're learning, but we want to localize the insight. I'll give you an example. We had a customer open a ticket saying, hey, I have 10,000 APs down, right? And, we step back and say, 10,000 APs don't commit suicide at the same time. What really is going on? Looked back at other customers, and they've had outages as well. And turns out, a regional POP in Western Canada was down. So now with this insight, Peter, what Marvis Actions is going to show is not 10,000 APs are down. Hey, for your own network or someone else's network. It's going to say this regional ISP in Western Canada is actually down, and that's a global learning, right? So that's the whole point of this thing is the global learning. Yeah.
Okay. You said you're getting the data on the POPs. Is that because you've got agents or
Yes.
business partnership within the POP, or is that coming from the sensors for the organizations that are connected to that POP?
Within the POPs as well. Yeah, and we're managing that globally. Customers don't have to lift a finger for that.
And if a customer did want to deploy one of their own agents at a POP that you did not yet service,
correct,
how would they do that?
So that is part of the future roadmap. It's not there on our first release, but we do want to enable customers to be able to deploy Marvis workers in their own data centers, in a VPC, all the kind of stuff. Yeah, that's not part of this initial realm of the launch.
So you're talking about taking POP data, Marvis Minis there, and using every other customer that has Minis enabled to be like distributed sensors.
Mm-hmm.
And you're then using your own learning based on all that information to tell everybody where.
Yeah, so again, if it is within the network, wireless, LAN, WAN, obviously that's your own data. If it is on the wide internet and we are realizing, hey, a Western Canada POP is down, now for every organization in their own Marvis Actions, it's going to say, hey, it's this ISP that's contributing, right? How they got the learning is through their own sensors or through other people's sensors, yeah.
Okay.
Super. Very good. With that, Bob, we'll actually maybe a couple of quick stories. Marvis Minis, because it has become truly the source of truth in networking, has become very deterministic in delivering some amazing customer outcomes. This is an example of a company where we were detecting application reachability issues. They were saying, well, nobody really opened a ticket yet. Again, every Marvis Minis failure has a dynamic packet capture waiting for you. And that basically, actually, it's imagine having the video footage of every crime committed in the world, and this is not even a real crime. It's a simulated crime committed in the world. We have the video footage waiting for it. So they went back and, a good old MTU problem actually turned out to be what was causing this. And so again, without users having to experience failure, we can get them ahead of this. Similarly, we find a lot of scenarios where, hey, all my SD-WAN is deployed, all the hubs should be active and up and running, active scenarios, and sometimes one of the nodes is actually not a real customer in a large retailer we found. So we're finding all kinds of interesting scenarios with Marvis Minis. With that, Bob, over to you.
See here.
So, Bob or Sudhir, can I ask? So it sounds like Marvis Minis is enabled on the access point.
Yes.
And so then my question is, you said if it's enabled in the organization, what does that entail? And then what kind of telemetry is it sending up, and which organizations might choose to do or not do that?
Good question, JJ. So basically, at an organization level, they can turn it off, Marvis Minis, if they would like to, right? So step one. But to enable it means that they will come in, there is no configuration. They will auto learn what SSIDs there are, meaning what VLANs those SSIDs drop into, what the DHCP, DNS, radius services are. We auto learn all of that, and then we start to validate. And from a workload perspective, some customers say, "Oh my God, is my network going to get overwhelmed with all this synthetic testing?" At all times, we're watching that our workload is less than 5% of the overall workload. That's number one. And so, but from a configuration perspective, enabling it perspective is really one checkbox to say, "Yep, I want this," or "Nope, I don't want this." The only other configuration that we allow at this point is, hey, I may have a private application that you may not have learned or known. And so, go to this IP address, do an HTTP curl, get me if I'm getting a reachability response. So we can actually define. In this new context of deep into the network, application visibility, we have a certain set of applications we're going to let them do, complete visibility into. There, we're doing continuous monitoring, literally, every minute, loss latency jitter across the entire WAN path.
Okay, so that makes sense to me for everything inside the organization.
Yeah.
But you also kind of mentioned the kind of distributed pop that
Correct.
Everybody participating in this client to cloud
Yes.
experience reporting. So I'm assuming it's also reporting up in for that.
That's correct. But if they turn it off for their organization, there is no last mile latency, none of that for them because they've turned it off.
Okay.
If they're enabled, then we're learning that last mile latency across the global CDN POPs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a large experience model. So this is where we're taking Zoom Teams data, we're joining it with network data, and we're basically training models now that can actually predict that Zoom Teams user experience. And then we're using some fancy math called Shapley that actually looks at the contribution margin of every network feature to that user experience minute. So this is like second generation SLEs. First generation is around trying to get network features, how they correlated and predicted a bad user minute. This is actually looking at how each network feature contributes to that bad user minute. So when we look at latency, we can now tell which feature is contributing the most latency to the problem. Now this year, what you're seeing us announcing, we're basically bringing new network features to the model. We're bringing new Zoom Teams features to the model. And then we're bringing a new GenAI summarization to the Shapley results. But more importantly, what we're announcing here today is a generalized large experience model that will now let us predict the video collaboration user experience on any network, even if they don't have Zoom Teams users. This is what I call the needle in the haystack, right? If the signal is big enough, they don't need fancy math to see the problem. The average IT person can see it. That's why they value the SLEs. But when you have what I call needle in the haystack, this is like where we had a customer that was having a problem, but the model highlighted it was really a radar channel that was causing a problem that we weren't able to see on the radio, narrowband radar. We had another issue where basically they're having problems at a site in India. They couldn't find out why certain people were having a problem. It turns out it was a misconfigured VPN gateway. People coming there were getting routed to Australia. We had a professor at a university was having problems at lunch. This model was able to track down that was basically a bunch of students walking past the office during lunchtime that was causing a problem. So large experience models, what I would say is your needle in the haystack problem. Sudhir, you want to come up? We'll give them a demo. Oh, no, this is the first thing.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. So basically what we're doing is the large experience model so far was deciphering, okay, what is contributing to my Teams or Zoom problem. Now the Marvis Minis client to cloud data is going to add to the features that we show under that model to say, oh, yeah, your Teams or Zoom is degraded, not just because it is Wi-Fi or, or the wired or the WAN, but maybe it is, this third hop into the data center that's causing that sub features. Now, Marvis Minis is feeding into our large experience model. And together, the idea is that we're landing them into Marvis Actions, right? Into what do you need to do? For us, the crusade has always been, for Bob, AI is artificial intelligence. For me, AI is actionable insight. That's it. It's not that much more complicated than that. Is how do we deliver actionable insight to when you need to take action? What do you need to do? So what we've done in terms of the demo, in terms of the product delivery here. So last year we've talked about Teams and Zoom integration, and so what that is now, fully available for our customers, Marvis customers worldwide. And what that entails is, if I connect to my Teams and Zoom using an API token. So now, cloud to cloud, we're integrating with Teams and Zoom data and getting that data for every individual user, every minute. We have a judgment on that minute. Is that a good Teams minute or a bad Teams minute? So every user, every Teams minute, if there's 100 people on a Teams call, that's 100 user minutes for every physical minute. And then once you have that kind of data, our true north is we got to get this to 100% good, right? And so here's an example. This is Juniper's global network. When this model was started, we had 30% failure, 20% failure, lots of actually really bad, Teams and Zoom user minutes. This is our headquarters in Sunnyvale, and you can go in and say, okay, 16 APs are having, delivering some of these bad Teams calls out of the 629 APs. Now, how do I understand this? How do I make this better? And that's where the Shapley model came in and said, okay, we can actually, pinpoint to this was VPN, this was CPU on your laptop is causing a bad Teams call, Wi-Fi switching. This is the end result, basically, where we were able to come to almost 0% on the Juniper Teams experience today at a global level. Now what we're talking about is without connecting Teams and Zoom, God forbid you're still using WebEx, right? Or, Google Meet or something. Without connecting to those, collaboration systems, can we pass judgment on your experience? So what this generalized model is saying, with no data coming from any of the collaboration applications, can we tell you if you're having a bad Teams, if you could be having a bad Teams experience? And if that is the case, what could the contributors be? And this is the Shapley model that's deciphering that. And so here's an example of an organization where we don't have any Teams and Zoom data coming from that organization. And we are saying, what, likely you're having almost 175 overall bad minutes. A lot of it is contributed by the WAN. So this is the purpose of the generalized model, right? Think of how large language models were built, is just learning language, learning the internet, learning the pages, everything that's available. For us, what we have done is now literally billions of Teams minutes that we've studied over the last 12 months or so. We now have been able to legitimately build a generalized model for collaboration judgment, and that's what we've been able to break through here.
I really like the idea of finding like a GenAl model. I think people are expecting that nowadays with AI.
Correct.
My next question would be, could you extend the model for other applications? The use case I'm thinking about is, university, and they have like a online exam, and they want to know if in that room the network would support the capacity for X amount of devices. It would be great if we have like a model one day that we can just ask, do you think, the network will support that in that room? And then it will tell us yes or no, you probably need to add APs or something. I think it would be a great enhancement to a model like this.
I'll give an answer, Bob, and you step in as well. So, Francois, the most stringent app on our networks today is the real-time collaboration apps, right? Mm-hmm. This is the hardest app on our network, which is Teams and Zoom with basically real-time, voice and video. And so we went after this, saying this is the canary in the coal mine. If this one is saying all green, you're able to do, the assumption is a Salesforce or a ServiceNow will work okay, or even an education app or an EMR app in healthcare should work okay given this is actually declaring victory. So that's why this is sort of the harbinger for, okay, what is actually the application experience on the network? That's how we focused on this. Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the other thing we're looking at right now is that Marvis Minis large experience model. Marvis Mini is going to bring much better WAN feature set into that particular model. You know, the other thing, you talk about other applications, I think this is where Marvis Minis is going to come in, because Marvis Minis is going to give us a bunch of connectivity information across all these other applications. You know, that's where we're looking to see if we can apply Shapley to those type of models. So I think that's how you extend what we're doing to other applications, and how Minis is going to bring better data into the existing model.
And how can you, apart from installing an agent on the laptop and the devices itself, how can you get data, client data, you know, into the cloud? I know it's a challenge, but I'm thinking it would be great to have like a Wi-Fi frame that allows the clients to tell the AP, this is how my application is doing. But
yeah, I think Analog team, I mean, there is a Marvis SDK, you know, so for customers who actually want to bring the client side into the model,
yeah,
I would say probably most of our customers who don't want to put something else on the application, we're looking to like Zoom Teams actually gives us visibility into the client. So usually that application, that end-to-end application, has visibility on this side here. Like Zoom and Teams, they know the CPU issues. They know when someone's downloading something in the background, right? So I would say 5 to 10% of all our Zoom team issues are due to something here. And so that's, you know, the application itself is starting to bring us in client information.
Short answer is actually, it's a great idea, and we should take that to standards, because right now, without an agent, I can't tell if the CPU is pegged on a device, right? That's a fact. And so that's why we had to go down the Marvis agent. Either we're getting the data from Zoom and Teams, then we don't put any agents. If we don't have that, then the Marvis client is an option to put out there to feed into this model. Yeah.
we could start simple with just having the clients telling their RSSI. That would be a good start.
Correct. Yes, well.
How much, I guess the question is really with like Zoom and Teams and maybe other collaboration platforms, is how much data do you collect from those platforms that helps feed into the Shapley model?
I would say we're on the order of hundreds of gigabytes right now, you know, so we're getting up close to terabytes of training data.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how would that impact the metrics you provide here using the generalized large experience model when you don't have the collaboration or the API integration there?
Yeah, so Navraj, who's actually building the models in the back there, I would say we are very close to making sure that the generalized model is almost on par with the Zoom Teams model. Mm-hmm. And so that's the generalization effort we're going through, is making sure the generalized model can accurately predict. I think this is answering your question, right? Yeah. How close is the generalized model to the Zoom Teams model? I'll let Navraj come in and get the answer, but it's getting very close. In terms of the results, what we do is we test the network with the data, pull the data out, and make sure we get the same Shapley results. Okay. Yeah. Right? And those are getting very close, 90%.
I mean, Wes, I don't know if your mic is on, but you know, just one of our customers has literally millions of Teams minutes in a day, right? I think in one of the large universities, correct? So Roel, basically with one customer over the last year, per day, we were getting over 1 million Teams minutes. So the model actually has had enough learning to, and that you're right. It is all how much we were able to learn and the data. But I think we've been blessed. Lots of customers. Obviously, as you can imagine, you know, an organization of 30,000 employees, the number of team calls that happen, and if we measure every user, every minute, every Teams call, that's a lot of data, and that's what we've been relying on.
I mean, so the model here is more about, you need a lot of data to train the model. It's back to the right data. Yeah. You know, that's where Minis is going to bring in much better WAN data. So we'll get much better visibility if there's a WAN problem going on.
You guys mentioned the Marvis client. Are you integrating data that you're receiving from Marvis client today for the AI models and the generalized models, or is that a roadmap item? Because we do have some clients that would prefer to deploy an agent out to certain laptops.
I would say that's a roadmap item. We have not integrated the Marvis SDK into the generalized model yet.
Kumar is saying we're doing it today. Is that correct? Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe they don't tell me
Yeah.
anything anymore.
I think, so from the Marvis client, if a laptops have a Marvis client or any Android device or iPhones, we do get the CPU and the battery status and the RSSI being reported from the client. We do kind of include that into the large experience model.
So, because Alan has a lot of existing Juniper Mist customers, and so he's asking on their behalf, is this something that they can use now, or in a couple of months and quarters type of thing?
This is in couple of months. So right now, this is in our staging. We are evaluating, like Bob said, we are doing out of sight model evaluations where we kind of take the data out, ensure that the without labeled data, we're close enough, 90-95%. We are evolving this, and then within 2 months, you will be able to enable it across your customers. Those who can't give either Teams or Zoom labeled data, or they are using a different collaboration tool, will be able to enable it GA in a couple of months.
If you haven't figured out, Alan, Bob and I don't do any work here. We just take credit for other people's work. He's the lead product manager for Marvis. So thank you, Kumar.
And we do have a question. So I'm trying to monitor Blue Sky. I think others are monitoring Twitter and other LinkedIn things. From Brian, who, thanks, Brian, wants to know about the minis, and can you tune it for checking what it's checking if you do something like if it realizes you failed over to like a backup link like cellular or something that's going to be less bandwidth, maybe higher latency.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so minis, as they are always on, so Marvis is something like in the backend in the cloud. It's constantly observing, right? It can pick up config changes, and if it knows that there has been a policy change on any of your SD-WAN policy, it does understand that now it has to check the traffic path through both node 0 and your backup node as well. And it does that. And one of our customers did catch an issue as they were doing such a change window where their policy hadn't taken care of traffic being passed through the node 1, and Minis right away kind of indicated that, hey, this application is not reachable through your node 1 anymore.
But let me rephrase JJ's question here with Brian's question is, if the network automatically fails over to cellular because there was an outage on my primary link, will Marvis now alert, oh my God, something happened, or will it learn the new baseline? Is that a question?
Let me read it verbatim. Reduce the checking it does if it detects you're on a metered WAN circuit like a cellular failover.
Good
so I think he's kind of getting to how much money are you going to cost me while I'm failed over to?
That is true. So the way we kind of ensure that doesn't happen is, for example, Minis does a speed test. It's smart enough where if it's a LTE link, it doesn't do that speed test on that LTE link actually. So it does understand things where which uplink, primary uplink or secondary uplink is being used as such.
I would say the access points are very lightly loaded. They look like a VoIP type of call, 16K bit per second call on the telemetry.
Okay, so you're not going to be racking up major minutes with that type of thing.
Good question.
I wanted to ask you guys about some of the Teams monitoring, because I understand with all of these communication platforms, and I don't manage these, but I know with customers, some of them are always client to cloud, but a lot of them have proxies on site.
That's right.
Are you guys differentiating that user experience metric?
So actually, one of the most important outcomes of this Marvis Minis client to cloud is now we actually can tell you, because we understand the entire path, right? Not just the last mile, last hop is we use for baselining, but we are actually, tracing the entire path and saying, and we have a baseline for last time, what was the latency at each hop? What is it now? And hey, was this call now going through Zscaler or some VPN? And if that's contributing to it, we actually will highlight that, right?
Okay, so it's path aware enough that if it's going through a proxy and the expectation.
Very much path aware, yes, on day one. Yeah, very good. Bob, keep going.
Yeah. So next, GenAI conversational interface. As I mentioned, I have been a fan of natural language interfaces since I started this. I'm a Star Trek fan. Talking to my computer is one of the goals of life. I would say we have had a great conversational interface in 2018. It did a very good job of understanding queries, but it really didn't do a great job of answering. With ChatGPT in 2022 and 2023, Marvis now has a voice, right? And so this is where we're starting to integrate this GenAI technology, Agentic AI, back into Marvis. Last year was all about public doc, making it easier to get those answers out of our Juniper public docs. This year, it's all about customer data. You can think of this as a replacement for Looker Tableau. When you want to know what's going on inside of your network, Marvis is going to be able to help you understand what your network is doing. You know, it'll be able to tell you what clients are on the network, how many clients been on the network, how many iOS clients, how many Windows clients. Basic questions that most IT people like to know without having to be an SQL expert going forward. So that's what we're doing. Sudhir?
This is one more.
Future?
This is definitely a lunch bet I lost to Bob, because when Bob in 2018 said, we're going to have a conversational assistant, I said, who the hell is going to talk to their network? This is networking nerds. Nobody wants a chat bot. And then ChatGPT comes and, definitely I had to pay up on that. And so now this is the new interface for Marvis's conversational assistant. This is something we're excited about. A brand new interface, essentially very ChatGPT-esque, and gives us a framework to go into agentic AI and MCP and all the new technologies. But basically, now the Marvis Conversational Assistant will grow up into this kind of interface and essentially be able to answer questions for previously previously, people had to build customized dashboards for. Now you can ask unstructured questions that weren't, nicely, properly laid out in a database. An example being, hey, how many of my APs across my entire organization have 100 megabits, right? We deployed a network with 27,000 APs, 6 years ago. 272 of the APs came up in 10.100, and that was, the epiphany saying, shouldn't the network just tell you that? And so that's why there's a Marvis action for it. But you can ask a question, in terms of this new interface to be able to get answers. Now, another thing is summarization of some of the visualization here. Not only now, Marvis, the new Marvis Conversational Assistant will have, completely customizable visualizations, but summarization of what you're actually seeing, when did it happen, what did it happen. Again, a lot of LLM, work involved in this. The one thing that I want to completely, emphatically state is 100% of our customer data remains private, is not exposed to any LLMs. While we're using LLMs in a lot of this formulation of the dashboards, our data, our customer data remains completely private. This is, the tough part. It took us a long time to actually make sure that, we keep this data private, keep these customer concerns of any data exposure to LLMs off the table. And then, now that we have that, now that that's in the past, basically we're able to say, okay, I want to be able to create customizable dashboards. As an example for us, wireless service levels and wired service levels are, sort of how we see if the network is healthy, and being able to create sort of customizable dashboards that reside in the network for us are super critical, right? Now, the last frontier here is, sorry, you had a question.
Yeah, my question is tied into that. Are you learning the questions people are asking?
Good question. That is the piece I will answer, Keith, right now.
But
yeah.
Tie into that. How do you teach people to ask good questions?
Very.
You've got solutions and dashboards to show them, but they don't even know it's there. How do they know to ask?
Great question. So let me answer the first one first. Is agentic AI is all the rage these days in across verticals, across industries, and so our first foray into this is going to be, leveraging, and one of the aspects of agentic AI is that there is reasoning and there's memory, and so this is for the first time as we launch into this multi-agent, framework for us under the hood for Marvis Conversation Assistant. Yes, it will actually learn. It'll have reasoning, it'll have memory, and that's sort of the basis of this, right? So, agentic AI for us is fundamentally different. We have lots of work underway on that, and you'll see more, through the rest of the year and beyond. But this is our first foray into agentic AI, and Bob talked about, MCP servers and stuff. You'll see more from us on that as well. But that's your first question. I think your second question was how do we teach people to ask good questions? And that's something I think we have to think through.
I can answer
yeah,
it
please.
briefly. So we have like intent classification agents, which wherein whenever you ask any questions, it could be like trend list, or whether it could like how is my network doing, how is my network doing yesterday versus today, or for last 7 days, right? Any question that you want to, whether it's a debug question or whether it's a documentation where you want to understand how is like how do you configure like missed access assurance, right? Anything you ask, there is an intent classification agent that goes through, and then based on that, it classifies, hey, this is a general documentation question versus this is like a trend list, or like probably like a troubleshoot question, right? And when it kind of gets into intent, further the agent keeps classifying on every input. Like for example, in one of the example, as we indicated, hey, Minis is already indicating our failures, like there is an action already indicating our failures. And as we do that, like when we say like give me more details, it does understand that the user is still trying to get more details around that intent and goes in further in line that, right? So that way, yes, the intent classification is the one that does the magic, where we don't have to train people. As it kind of as the questions are asked, these are saved, and then the model is trained over and over again, where if somebody gives us a thumbs down, like, hey, this was not my intent, that kind of adds to that training back to the next time when it answers the question.
Yeah, I would add, Keith, I mean, I don't know if you use ChatGPT lately. The user experience is slightly changing. You know, ChatGPT will come up and say, I think the user is asking something about this. Now, all these technologies now have history in it. So I think as people start to learn to use this technology, I think they're going to see a history of it, right? That's the kind of how they get feedback from, this is what I think you asked. If you get the wrong answer, you can re-ask the question again. And actually the LLM will actually take that history into account. So I think that's kind of that people are going to learn how to use this.
The reason I brought that up is you had some dashboards that were dynamically built because someone asked a question. If Sam built one of those, I would like to know what Sam's asking.
Right.
Because it's already been done and I didn't think about it. So there's a lot of data
we could do better on that.
I think there's an add to your dashboard feature.
Yeah.
I think there's a little feature up there. I don't know if it was in demo.
No, yeah, but I think Keith's question is, how do I know the intelligent questions others are asking? I think we could do a better job.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's move forward because we're running out of time. Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. In terms of the data that you're using to feed it, so obviously you've got your network data and you've got your docs. Mm-hmm. Are you also using any external data? So I don't know, like data from the Network Alliance on client capabilities. Is any external data being fed in, or is it just data held by?
I'll take a first stab, and then so what we are doing, what Marvis has actually become now, is we are voracious consumers of data from external sources as well, such as Teams and Zoom is external to us, right? And Teams and Zoom is not just telling us about Teams and Zoom, it's actually telling us about the laptops, CPU and memory, all this kind of stuff. So that's one category of people that are giving us data. We integrate natively with Cradlepoint. And so we get all of that data directly into the dashboard. We integrate it natively with Solona. We're getting data there. We're integrating natively with, some of the security application providers. The top two major security providers, they both have their digital experience applications. That data is also natively integrated to Mist. And now, Slava is going to present, we're integrated with MDM solutions. So we basically have created this northbound pipeline that is easy for us to bring in external data. So we are voracious intentionally, like as an example, one of the next things that we were thinking about is, should we integrate with application performance monitoring tools, right? We obviously already integrate with ServiceNow. Should we make that bi-directional, where ServiceNow tells us something, that there was a config change and a firewall that we don't manage and that kind of stuff. So there's a few more things we could do, but we are open to actually consuming a lot of this and making meaning.
I was more thinking of like informational documentation, like standards and things like that. Because, so for example, if I've got a Wi-Fi 6 network, and I say, how many of my clients are currently Wi-Fi 7 capable? Probably from data on the network, because it only understands Wi-Fi 6, well, no.
Yeah.
But because you classify devices and there's an iPhone 16 or whatever, if you knew that external information, you could answer that question.
I think I would say that's on the roadmap. I mean, right now we're ingesting data from the network, from Zoom, third-party partners. Your question is yes, we will start ingesting data from the internet. That'd be the next step. If you ask me a question, I'll probably go out to the internet to see if there's an answer on the internet.
There's an answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
All right.
And wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Marvis Actions. This is our baby. This is this cup of coffee, self-driving component of Marvis. After I took my self-driving Waymo Uber, I am on the mission now to move us from assisted self-driving to fully self-driving. If you look at Marvis Actions has always done a great job on assisted actions, right? We do a great job of helping ITs, here's an issue, here's a recommendation, here's the evidence for the recommendation. With this Marvis Actions facelift, you're going to see us start driving more towards self-driving. This is where Marvis knows how to fix a problem. Marvis is going to start asking permission to fix that stuck port, fix that missing VLAN, and then ask, would you like me to put this on the trusted self-driving list? So this is the Marvis Actions facelift, where we are going to be moving from that assisted driving experience to more of that Waymo Uber fully self-driving and earning the trust of IT.
Awesome. So this has been, ever since Bob came to WLPC 2 years ago, I think, we've been on this thing crusade. And so what we are doing now is this new facelift for Marvis Actions. There is a new self-drivable, icon there saying, hey, these actions, if you give us permission, we could fix them. We don't even have to just alert you. And so now these are the list of things. Port stuck is an interesting example. You would think that's that's something we may not be able to actually self-drive. It is fascinating. Basically think of a thermostat, a video camera, a sensor that has a certain periodicity of traffic, and we're observing that periodicity and saying, this port didn't go down, but suddenly the traffic disappeared. And with high efficacy, we could actually say, this video camera, something needs to happen, and we need to bounce this port. And literally, we bounce, ports like this around the world. I would say north of 20,000 Ethernet ports we bounce on a daily basis around our universe. And so essentially, what this eliminates is if somebody goes in to check the video footage, 5 days later, they don't have the epiphany shit. Oh my God, this thing did not actually send video for the last 5 days. We are remediating. So self-driving can come to even sort of very legacy use cases like that. Another example is if we have all the access VLANs on a switch, but one of them isn't trunked up to on the uplink port, right? Actually, we could go change configuration on switching. So the trust part of this is obviously you're going to first, we have to earn the trust of network IT, because at this point we're starting to touch config, and that's scary for a lot of people. So, but the moment you get that trust, one item at a time, our goal is everything we can. We want to get Marvis Actions to be self-driving, right? It is really powerful, right? So, with that, what our fundamental focus, as Sujay pointed out at the very top of the session, is, look, every vendor is going to come here and talk about AI and models and all kinds of stuff. Our claim to fame is we basically are focused on customer outcomes, right? And so, for all of the Marvis, things that you've seen today, our focus has been around how do we deliver a customer experience enabler? How do we enable a better customer experience? That's right. Take all of the entire Marvis session. The summary of it for us is happy customers, and that's what across verticals. Imagine what we do today. We go in and get deployed in a small lawyer office or a dentist office to literally the largest networks in the world. Our current largest network from a wireless perspective, 400,000 access points deployed in production after deploying 400,000 APs across their global estate. They've chosen to deploy switching with us, right? And that's why we have a small switching section at the end of this thing. 90,000 switches deployed, right? It is delivering amazing customer outcomes. Is what the summary of this Marvis session is. With Chris, yeah.
On the actions, so your goal is to add more and more into
Yes.
the actions. What's the goal when it comes to minimizing risk with detection of issues and rollback? So you've taken action, and oh my goodness, things have gone wrong.
Yeah.
What's the plan to detect that and roll back those changes?
So, Chris, I think our entire focus from day one has been efficacy, right? Because if we don't get efficacy right, this is no different than our grandfathers alerting that we had just 5 years ago, and oodles of alerts, and which one do I even start with? So our entire focus has been efficacy. So when we take a self-driving action, it's near 99% efficacy. Your question is, but what about that 1%, right? Because shit happens in real world, right? And so for that, we have to institute. I don't think today we have an auto rollback of this, but but predominantly anything that is self-driving, we have extreme high efficacy, right? So, Bob,
I got a question on that.
Yeah,
as a network administrator, how do you know what changes were made? Because generally you want to go through some kind of change control process in case you do need to roll back, right?
Very good question. So actually, Marvis Actions previously did not have that. And so the very last part of the demo is we actually ended up essentially with now a history of all the both self-driven or driver-assisted actions. Now there's a complete history and visualization for that. We didn't have that till this launch. Yeah, Roel.
For the customers that have tested this for you, how do they tie this to their change control process? Like what I'm thinking through is, since you've got AI, can it learn when my maintenance windows are, submit a change ticket? Because I have an organization where the change control person is probably going to be very scared of this.
That's correct. So actually, Roel, this port stuck as an example. The only reason we do it is there is such high efficacy that we knew that port is shot. We know there is no video coming in. This is not a change control. Think of this as for that microcosm of an application, which is that video camera, it's a network down situation, right? And so it's not a change control kind of situation. It's hey, this application is not functioning, go remediate it for me. And that's the only time we're actually doing self-driving. Right?
Yeah. I would say
More like RRM.
I would think of this as radio resource management, right? When we started that 20 years ago, IT did not trust it, right? They had an on-off switch, and most, like, I can do better. We're in the same point with network resource management. So your question, if customers don't trust it, they're not going to turn it on. So I think this is the transition to network resource management going forward. Now, to your question about change, I would tell you, looking to see if anything changed statistically before and after a change, that's much easier math than trying to do anomaly detection, because I have the event. I can look and see, did anything statistically change in the network? And I think you'll see us go back to rollback. We will be able to check if you change, if a update, did something statistically change in the network that would trigger a rollback.
I have a question along the same lines too, because a lot of organizations have zero trust solutions and network access control solutions that are tied into the infrastructure. So obviously, when we do that, we have to have one source of truth of where the change control stuff is happening from. What's going to be the answer for that, for the organizations that have that type of integration?
For the most part, every action that we produce on Marvis Actions is coming in as a webhook into a ServiceNow or some other, their source of truth of all global actions in the enterprise. So that's where we record all of this, right? They will never miss one of these. And now there's a trail of,
Yeah, and I'm less concerned about auditing that it happened, but more that a lot of the products that integrate with like local network resources, especially on the wired side, can't have something else making changes to the infrastructure when it's trying to do port changes, VLAN status changes. And I know obviously you guys have access assurance. Will that be able to?
I think the answer would be something like, it's like right now we work very closely with ServiceNow, right? And so ServiceNow becomes that source of truth, where Marvis will send the request to ServiceNow to actually execute something.
No, Bob, what JJ is asking is, a port may be intentionally changing profile because of network access policy change. And so how do we not have a race condition between us trying to self-drive and...
I think my point is we don't touch the port. We send the message to the source of the change, like ServiceNow, because a customer may trust ServiceNow to make the workflow change, right? They may want all changes in the network go through ServiceNow. I think that's what you're thinking.
Yeah, not quite. But I guess my question is, will the access assurance solution be able to will it fit into this if somebody needs to be doing that type of port level control?
Wes?
Yeah, and I would say, to your point of, are there multiple sources of truth? I mean, no, you don't. You want one, right? And so depending on where your source of truth is, if it's missed, most of the time it is missed, especially if the switches are managed by mist. And that's where, this port stock would apply. And so if you choose to turn on the self-driving aspect of it, then mist is your source of truth. And with some of the NAC solutions that want full control over network state, they're already talking to our APIs to get network state, and they're already talking to the APIs to get network state, pulling that back in, and so there's already a sync that's happening because configuration is already coming from Mist.
Okay, awesome.